That
Here.
way I can download it from the Zoom account.
Okay.
Okay.
Also just press going live on YouTube.
How do I, is it on, where is it on YouTube?
On
You
our
just-
channel.
Do I have to press got it? Do I do that?
You
You're
can
fine.
answer that, yeah.
Okay, just did it.
Is
I
it
got
also
it.
going to be on Facebook?
You only get one or the other. You only get to choose either YouTube or Facebook. You can't do both.
Okay, then I'm going to do Facebook on my own page.
Okay, now
Great.
that, can you do that? I guess you can. Cool. Ah, with a different camera. Okay.
Oh, boy. Oh, all these people. That's nice.
They're all coming to hear you.
Nah, they're. What else do you do at 12 o'clock on a Sunday in New York City? Let alone 9 o'clock in California. There, Rabbi Sheldendorf's going. That's clearly. Oh my, all these people. Okay.
Let's just wait like 3-4 more minutes.
No, we're waiting. I'm still talking to you. I guess people can hear us, but this would be once we have about this growing number of people. I guess input is not going to work too well here.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to leave time for questions or comments, but I think we're going to be. That's probably too many people for that. What do you think, Michal?
I mean, we do have like a couple of more minutes until it's 7, right?
No, we're clearly going to have, 25, 26 people. That's whatever.
Yeah.
All right. Hello to anyone I know. I can't call you all by name. I know too many of you, but catch it, take it personally, and all that.
What's the matter? Your old co-counselor? You can't say hi? Hello,
Okay.
Benji.
I introduced all your name and I said Rabbi Sheldendorf. I didn't say Shelley. That's
Oh, I just said Benji. It's like,
yeah. I want you to. I won't name the person, but
okay.
I once spoke at a rabbi's synagogue for, I guess it was Slicha, and he went by as appropriately Rabbi so and so and so and so, and after he introduces me, he's walking back and I'm walking up to the podium, and he says, "You refer to me as Richie, I'm going to throw you out of here."
I know which Richie it was too.
That's your assumption.
Good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you too.
Okay, I'll
Have a
shut up.
good. I wish everybody ultimately a good Chag Sameach and all that.
So, yeah.
Hope you had an easy fast. I know. Again, I apologize to those other rabbis, other friends, and I will just kind of hold back. And we're already on page 2, so some of you. I have 30 seconds. Let me see who's on page 2 for a second. Oh, I see. No, it just overlaps. Okay, Alan. Oh my goodness. Okay, I'll just assume it. Everybody I ever knew was tomorrow.
Wouldn't miss you, Rabbi. Wouldn't miss you.
Uh-huh. I guess I should have, should be more in touch with people with these things. I'm not used. We used to do what did we call that? Skype stuff. Oh wow, Prague. We had Prague. We're out here. Michal, I'm waiting for you to the high sign, okay? And,
yeah, I think we can start. So welcome everyone. Nice to meet you. My name is Michal Makov-Peled, and I'm the Director of Development for the Schechter Institute. I have a big shoes to fill today as I'm hosting instead of Rabbi David Belinking, who is on his way flying back from New York after spending the high holidays, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur over there. So I hope I will be gracious enough as he is. And of course, excuse my English and my Israeli accent. But I'm very excited, very happy to have you here today for our starting to be traditional Zooming before the holidays. And today we're zooming into Sukkot. And with no further ado, I'd like to give Rabbi Benjamin Siegel. He's the past president of the Schechter Institute, and he's also the author of Kohelet's Pursuit of Truth, to start his presentation. Thank you so much.
We're on to all of you in advance, and I hope I remember at the end to wish you a Chag Sameach. It's very nice to be here. I am by degree a rabbi, and we always like to talk, so you can imagine what kind of mood I'm in. Here I am, people listening. Tonight, this evening, there's a wonderful schedule, different aspects of Sukkot and computation. My particular session deals with the connection, as will the next, in a different way, of Kohelet, or the book of Ecclesiastes, and Sukkot, particularly in my slot in terms of the category of joy. Prior to telling what I'll cover, a terminology issue. I will try to be careful and use the word Ecclesiastes for the name of the book. And I will try to use and remember to use Kohelet as the name of the person who speaks 95% of the book. He is a person in the book. If I slip, someone correct me, but we will, otherwise it becomes confusing. The association of, we'll start with the association of the holiday of Sukkot with the book of Ecclesiastes. From there, we will go to why people suggest in broad terms why the two are connected, leading to the possible connection of happiness in both the text and the holiday of Sukkot. At that point, I will deal a little bit with happiness in Jewish tradition, a little bit with Kohelet as such, and then happiness or joy in Kohelet, and perhaps what one might think about during the holidays. We probably have too many people to interrupt. I'm not good at looking at chats while I talk. If I end early, and if you have a question, maybe put it in a chat. Maybe I'll relate to it, but I can't promise. Time is short, and there are a lot of people here. So here we go. I promised another person in Schechter Institute to remind or to tell people. There are two things that could fill in beyond tonight's session. One is, of course, to read my book on the subject, which is sold through Schechter. It is also sold through Amazon Book Depository and such things. It is called Kohelet's Pursuit of Truth, under my name. And if anyone is interested in another aspect of all this, which is reacting to the book of Kohelet, not studying it, but reacting to the claims and life and author of Kohelet for 6 weeks, the way the author hoped people would discuss and react, that is going to be a course offered by the Schechter Adult Institute, which if you'll type into Schechter Institute, you'll find under their adult education advertisement. I should say, please, I have no royalties, and I am teaching the course as a volunteer subject, so it's not a self-interest issue. It's a wonderful book to read. Now, let's go on. So we will do, as I said, the association of Ecclesiastes with Sukkot first. In the 8th century of our era, in the book Masechet Sofrim, it is sort of a post-Talmudic, late Talmudic, sort of post-Talmudic text. There's an indication that the 5 books, which we call scrolls, Megillot, are to be read on particular holidays. Some of this is quite obvious. Esther tells the story of Purim. We should read Esther. Lamentations tells of the destruction of the temple, belongs on Tisha B'Av. To other kind of fit the seasons, the Song of Songs is highly dealing with nature, and a lot of it, not all of it, with early spring. It fits Passover. And Ruth fits the agricultural cycle, also possibly her acceptance of Torah or acceptance of Jewishness, parallel to the acceptance of Torah on Mount Sinai. That leaves one more book, the book of Ecclesiastes and the holiday of Sukkot, which don't really seem to match. Okay? Why then did it happen? There are many theories, and some of them are really beautiful. I have a feeling that if the second session today, you will have in much greater depth one such view of the connection. But just in a general manner of speaking, as the things that I've learned over the years, one of the theories, teachers at the Jewish Theological Seminary said, well, you only had one left over, and you only had one holiday out there. It's Sukkot, so let's put it in there. That's one way to do it. There are theories, there are parallels. The Sukkah is not very permanent. The book of Ecclesiastes kind of says nothing is permanent. It's all hevel, vanity, or fleeting wind, if you will. There's another possible parallel that I deal with today, and that both seem to dwell upon happiness. The word here is simcha, not other words. And there are theories that there's a counterweight going on here, that the author of Ecclesiastes is seeking something permanent. And yet on Sukkot, we run out to seek that which is not permanent. We move out to the house which is not. So there are various theories. We tonight will be dealing with one possible connection, and that is the connection of happiness. I should also note, by the way, that of my scrolls, this is the least read. Most Sephardim do not read Ecclesiastes on Sukkot. And even within Sephardim Ashkenazi, there are groups in each group that behave oppositely. It is not read universally on Sukkot. My congregation does. I recommend it to you highly. Okay, let's now get to, in turn, happiness, first in other sources in the Bible, second, the book of Kohelet, and then happiness in Kohelet, and we'll see what comes. Happiness is a good name in Judaism. It's, you know, from Hasidic songs from Rabbi Nachman, mitzvah gdol simcha. It's a great mitzvah to live or be in all your life. We sing all the time. Every time a holiday comes with samachta b'chagecha, even if it's not from the source of the holiday. Simcha, it's a good thing. It's simcha. Simcha la'artsecha. We sang together whenever the cantor said it in the Yom Kippur liturgy. Let's go back, though, not to Hasidic, all the way back to Torah. Where is simcha in the Torah? Now, be careful. I'm not saying happiness in the Bible. There are various words for happiness. There's a very heavy word for happiness called ashrei. That's mostly in Psalms, and it is a really deep satisfaction, peace with life, complete. That's also called happiness, but that's not. Simcha is closer to cheer, good times. Going back to the Torah, 3 times it's personal. Avimelech says it to Abraham and says it to Moses. A soldier who's just married doesn't have to go to the army for a year so he can make his wife happy. That's the simcha, right? Most of the Torah deals with, you might say, sacrifice and holidays. The truth of the matter is, most of those references are to food. V'samachta b'chagecha, and the simcha is mentioned all the time with sacrifices, probably means something like eating meat. And you should enjoy yourself. And a good time. Difference of opinion in translations in the Bible. The Jewish translation, JPS, says you should be happy in your holidays, thinking it means you're taking delight in the fact that it's a holiday. But the NRSV, the Revised Standard Version, is better, more exact. He said you should be happy during your holidays. During your holidays, eat meat, eat wine. And when you come to Psachim and they deal with the Samachta B'chagecha, they also say it's wine, and Psachim, part of the Talmud, or it's meat. They also have the possibility of meat. That's what it's there back there. We're jumping back now to a part of the Bible in which is really something else, and that is in the book of Kohelet. Clearly, the Torah says v'samachta b'chagecha in relation to Sukkot and one other holiday, but basically it seems to deal with Sukkot. And it is a major word in Kohelet, as we shall see. Before we look at where it happens in Kohelet, a few words about the book of Ecclesiastes, about the Ecclesiastes. Let's be right in our terminology. Ecclesiastes is this scroll. If you have been told or grew up understanding that King Solomon wrote the book of Ecclesiastes, I don't mean to be ultra critical, but it can't be. The Hebrew of Ecclesiastes is late Hebrew well into the Second Temple period. No one in Shakespeare's time could write in 20th century, 21st century English. It can be. So too, Solomon could not write the Hebrew of the book of Kohelet of Ecclesiastes. Couldn't be. It is a Second Temple book. It is very clearly influenced by questions that are also being asked in the beginning of Greek philosophy. That is, I'm not saying it is Greek philosophy. Be careful, okay? It is using the same questions that you find in Greek philosophy. These are the beginning ages of Stoicism and Epicureanism, just like Kohelet, which is the only book in the Bible which concentrates on I, me. I will determine what truth is. I will find it. That is the basis of very different approaches, Stoicism, Epicureanism, and the questions are the same. The answers are not. Absolutely not. And there is no way to categorize the book of Ecclesiastes as part of Greek philosophy. Doesn't work. People have tried. And when they try, they fail. Trust me, read more in my books if you would, it doesn't work. What is that? Is it a book of philosophy? Jewish philosophy? No, it's even not. A book of philosophy, by its very nature, has to avoid contradictions. That would be a poor book of philosophy. If I say one thing on one page and 40 pages later say something else, let alone 10 contradictions. It is not a book of philosophy. It is a story, a novel. It is structured very clearly as a novel. Someone introduces the character of Kohelet and summarizes his life at the end. And then you have 3 sections which trace Kohelet's life. One, Kohelet himself makes up a story about himself. I was once a king. I was the richest person on earth. I knew more than anything on than anyone else on earth. Let me tell you about what I know. Part 1. With poems that themselves will prove not clear in the second part of Kohelet, he goes out in the world. He is no longer pretending he's a king. And he now goes through a series of 6 recorded time experiments. Every one of them starts with the word experience and ends, watch with this word, with the word joy. Experience, ending joy. Experience, ending joy. I'm not the only person who says it. There's another guy in France who came up with that theory first. And then at the end, part 3, he's approaching death. Very clear this is a book where he writes something, he experiences life, shares his experience, and then talks about the approaching death. It's almost a novel of a biography, a wonderful book. And when you read a biography, change becomes exciting. When somebody changes or contradicts what he said before, then it's a moment of joy. Look, why, how, what's happening, okay? That is the book of Kohelet. It is a book full of change. Let me just show you. I'll have to do this quickly because I don't want to run out of time. Let me see where we get here. Watch, I don't see your faces now, but trust. These are items of change in the book of Kohelet, just to illustrate. I'll run right down the word anguish. That's my translation for Re'ut Ruach. It disappears halfway through the book. Concentration he has on I, disappears in 12 chapters. He's talking more about only starts at 4. What advantage? That's what's important for him, but only in the first half of the book. It disappears. Ships, the heart, which in Bible is the focus of thought more than anything else. Emotion is in the kidneys, and the brain doesn't exist. In the first half, focuses on learning, declaring, and searching. Later, it's on joy. Vapor, which is what other translations call vanity, nothingness. Vapor is literally a breath. You can't hold it, and in time, it disappears before you know it's there. It moves, describes a terrible thing along, and then by the end, about you or vapor. Advice moves. First, he says advantages. Then he says, well, it's better to do certain things. And finally, he tells you what to do. Sun changes radically. In the beginning, it's just permanence, whether it's bad or good, it's there, keeps coming. Then it's a limited field of vision. He only sees what's under the sun. And finally, it's a source of pleasure, the heat and the absence of death, which is called darkness. Metaphors, which are personal, are almost absent from the first half, apart from the word vapor, then grow exponentially until the end, in which they explode all over the book. And stark contradictions. In the beginning, it says, I will apply my heart. I'm going to find out what wisdom is. And by the end, towards the second half, he says, I would like to be wise. I can't. I don't know how to be wise. Good heart. In the beginning, he says it comes through anger. In the end, it says it comes through drinking. I'm not making that up. Life. First, he says better dead. Then he says, what? Is it better even to be stillborn? And then later he says, better to be a live dog than a dead lion. Women are first more bitter than death, and then experience life with the woman you love. Man's spirit in the end, in the beginning, he asks in a rhetorical question, if it rises. meaning it doesn't. At the end of the book, the last thing he says, the spirit returns to God who gave it. We'll talk about joy in a second. So it's quite clear. The book is filled with change. If I had to summarize it, it's a man who gets older. He's becoming much more concerned with death. He is less concerned with himself than other people. He's no longer concerned with telling you 5 facts, but what you should do and what might be better than other things. He is interested in metaphor, which is poetry, teaching when you try to teach meaningfully, that is absent from the beginning. This is a man who is growing. He's becoming more traditional as he goes on. Please be careful. You'll read my book if you want. I can't say more than this. I'm not saying that the end is better than the beginning. You might read the book of Ecclesiastes and say he became scared of his own conclusions and he stepped back from being honest. You can say that if you want. Or you can say he grew up and grew wiser. That's for you as the reader to read. And if we go in course, we will argue out what he might have meant. I'm not saying it changes for better or worse, but change he does. He grows. He's a different human being. Okay? And all that is background to what we will look at now, and that is joy in Ecclesiastes, because just like everything else, joy develops. Not quite as much as some other things. I mean, he says life is horrible. I'd rather be dead. And then he says, there's nothing better than life. Better a live dog than a dead lion, right? But joy is a much more complex subject, and it is possibly the connection to why this is read on the holiday of Sukkot. Sukkot is the holiday of joy. And now, is Kohelet there to tell us what joy is really like? Joy in Ecclesiastes. There's a lot of stuff here. We're not going to do it all. I have a bunch of stars here. The first 4 all come from the first section of the book, which deals with what his insight as the rich king. All right. In the beginning, you can see in verses 2, 1, and 2, it doesn't. What is enjoyment? Look at the end. What does it accomplish? There's nothing to it. There's nothing to it. 2:10 enjoyed everything, and then look at 2:11 right after. It's vapor. It's anguish. There's no advantage. This joy. It doesn't do it. But as he comes toward the end of, even within this first section, he sort of steps back, and we're going to see it again in the second section. Look, he's given wisdom and knowledge and enjoyment to the man who's good in his presence. It's sort of a gift from God. And he'll say in 3:12, still in that summary of what he knows, I know there's nothing better within this than enjoying and acting beneficially in his lifetime. Any man who consumes and drinks sees benefit, it's a gift from God. So he's moved even in this first section. You have this kind of guy. He experimented. He concluded joy is not worth anything. And then sure enough, by the end, sort of saying, you know what? It's what you got. You should maybe do it. And then we look through the series of experiences. I marked them. I'm a little anal, so I put all the joys in here, but we'll just look at the last sentence of the 6 sections. A, I saw there's nothing better than a man who enjoys it. That's what he's got. Who knows that? It's a hell of a weak reason, but take it. B, any man whom God gives wealth and power, property, etc., and to enjoy the fruits of his toil, that's a gift, right? Why? 19. For he will not brood much over the days of his life, because God keeps him concerned with his heart's enjoyment. Why should you be joyful? It keeps you from thinking about the rest of the stuff. All right? Oh boy. Oh boy. Okay. C. We're moving along through the 6. He says, on a good day, experience. We saw before good life and joy are synonyms. Bad day, just live with it, but when you get it, you get it. D. He's moving along. He's coming to recommended. So I commended the joy. There's nothing better. There's nothing better than to eat, drink, be joyful. That can stay with you while he's already recommending the stuff. And on the 5th, go and look at this section is too long to read all at once, but look at it briefly on your screen. Go, eat, drink, white clothes, get married, enjoy. That's what you have. That's what you can do. Go for this joy. And you kind of wonder in this book, which so dwells on how nothing is worthwhile, how big is this? It's like the small counterweight or big counterweight. No. And F, 11:7, which is the end of the 6th. Even if a man goes many, take joy in it. Do it. Well, remember the days of darkness, which will be, because after this, there's nothing else. And then in the beginning of the final thing on death, the very first thing he says, take joy, O youth, in your earliest days. Let your hearts be good to you in the days of your youth, and walk in the paths of what your eyes can see. God's going to judge you. All right. This is, I have to leave it to you. Is this a big recommendation for joy? Does it appeal? Is this what they meant? Is this a joy, perhaps a counter to the joy of Sukkot? And if you're getting drunk on Simchat Torah, hey guys, take it easy. Have for the moment, but it's not really the end all be all of all that you have. I don't think I have time. Who's the French? Did I refer to a French philosopher? Someone asked. French philosopher.
No, I think you just mentioned a book of philosophy and why Kohelet is not a book of philosophy, right?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Same I do on joy. Nobody has a Kohelet's idea of joy. If that was a question, or so that there was a question there. Nobody has Kohelet's idea of joy. It is so unique. I'm looking quick at the who wrote Ecclesiastes. We don't know. Someone asked. We don't know. And those seem to be the messages, unless I missed some. I think that's it. Let me just end illustrating to you what we're going to do when we come to joy in this discussion class. There's my book on Kohelet. I believe that Kohelet just begs for huge numbers of reaction. So unlike all of my other biblical commentaries, I have a whole section at the end of modern poetry and prose, which reacts to Kohelet. Bad, good, etc., and so forth. And I even list questions. Would Kohelet have written what he did if he were married, if he had children, etc.? That's for the course, if anyone wants to take that discussion course. But one of the most impressive pieces at the back is by Rabbi Karl Bach. This is Yosef Tzvi Karl Bach. I won't quote it because I'll run over time. Who dies in the Shoah, he dies in the Holocaust, all right? And he writes this praise of Kohelet, in which he says basically, every time I'm depressed, I read Kohelet, and I learn again that I'm not alone in suffering, and in seeing all the bad in the world. And Kohelet teaches me that I must seize joy when I can. I almost cry when I read this stuff. It is the most complex and moving testimony to joy and Kohelet I know. It is worthwhile. If you can read my book, read my book. If you don't read the book of Kohelet. Remember, it's a biography. If you take the conversation course, I promise you, no one will be told who's right or wrong. We're going to react to what Kohelet says. But it is a wonderful, I think one of the greatest gifts we have with the holidays is that someone, for some reason, whatever it was, said to us when you're Samachta b'chagecha, take the time, Saturday afternoon, take the book, read it, and think about it. Confront this incredibly complex man who could say, be joyful in a way that is different than probably anything we thought about before. I apologize we couldn't exchange. I never teach like this, but that is the nature of a large attendance at a group, and I do apologize to all of you. Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach. Thank you so much, Rabbi Benjamin. I will say that for me, for sure, reading the book of Kohelet in the upcoming holiday will be different now after hearing some of the stories and your commentary on it. Thank you very, very much. And we'll be moving on to Rabbi Mimi. Can we see you, Rabbi Mimi?
I'm here on my screen. I'm right next to you.
Right, here you are. So just before we'll start, I will just say that I am in the messages in the chat. I am just uploading this document with all the resources for Rabbi Mimi's class. So you can open. She doesn't want everyone, she wants everyone to see as much of each other as possible. So you could just look into it and open it up and read it on your computer while Rabbi Mimi is speaking. And I'll just say one more word that Rabbi Mimi Siegel, if you don't know her, she's a doctor and she's a spiritual influencer, Mashpia Ruchanit, and a senior lecturer at the Schechter Rabbinical Seminary. Rabbi Mimi, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. And since I do see so many familiar names and faces, I'm going to start where we always start together. You know, a nigun, an opening prayer, and then we'll go into some text study. Achamanu yakim lanu et Sukkot avidanu falet. Achamanu yakim lanu et Sukkot avidanu falet. Achamanu yakim lanu et Sukkot avidanu falet. Achamanu yakim lanu et Sukkot avidanu. I can read lips, so I see if you're singing with me or not. Brich Rachamana Malka de Alma Ima Ila'a, one and only Divine Mother. What a miracle that you give us an opportunity to come so close to understanding what it is to make a miracle happen, what it is to make yesh me'ayin. A moment ago, we had a space that seemed no space. Now all of a sudden we have our dwelling, our home for the next 7 days. What a miracle that is. And thank you for giving us this opportunity to experience it. And then the miracle of being able to be each of us in our own homes at the same time come together in the merit of learning Torah together to have this merit and this blessing of sitting and learning together. I'm grateful for all of them. And I'm grateful for Machon Schechter for organizing this opportunity to stop from the building, from the cooking, from the shopping, from the preparing, from the Arba Minim, to actually take a few minutes to sit, to learn, to think. I want to borrow or claim one word that came up multiple times in our learning right now with Rabbi Benji Siegel, and that's the word metaphor. Because what I'd like to do through looking at the Hasidic sources that I brought, to think of the Sukkah as a metaphor. And specifically in these Hasidic teachings, a metaphor for our relationship with God. I want us to look at the Sukkah as a metaphor for our relationship with God. And the truth is that I find it, and I don't know about you, but there's a part of me that's very grateful for the proximity of Sukkot to Yom Kippur. Because the question really is, how do we walk away from Yom Kippur? On Yom Kippur, we were cloistered. We were all together in community and so focused on our prayer and our family, our community, the future, what's going to be, how's it going to be? The machzor with thousands of words telling us what to think, what to feel, how to be. And how do we walk away from it? Like lahavdil, like when we get it from Shiva. How do we get up from Shiva? Right? We know that we don't get up from Shiva, we're raised from Shiva. Someone literally pulls us up. So here as well, I want to say, how do we walk away from Yom Kippur and into the world, into all these promises and commitments that we have made for ourselves and towards the one and only? I think that we actually get one taste of it, truth be told, when we're actually still in Beit Knesset, still praying. For those of us that stay and actually stay for the Tfilat Arvit, for me, that's the first step out of Yom Kippur. I will confess, maybe I'm dating myself. I'm clearly dating myself. There is a way in which I feel that Hashem Hu Elokim 7 times is similar to what happens in Get Smart. Remember, at the end of Get Smart, there's one gate that goes down and another gate that goes down and another and another and another. And I always feel that as a saying 7 times Hashem Elokim, there's this some kind of closure that's happening. Thank God, the Meir Parmeshlan says we're locked. It's Ni'ilah, we're locked. I'm locking, but we're locked in, not locked out. As a child, I thought we were locked out, and I was devastated when Ni'ilah came to an end. I felt, oh my God, now what happens? But his teaching tells me locked in, the gate is locked behind. Nonetheless, that moment of Kriyat Shema, of Arvit, that's my first step out of Yom Kippur. Because a minute ago, I was screaming at the top of my lungs, honestly, Baruch Shem Kol Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed 3 times. And then all of a sudden, the Shema of Arvit, of Motzei Yom Kippur, and all of a sudden I'm back to whispering, Baruch Shem Kol Malchuto Le'olam. I can't say it out loud. I'm no longer on the inside.
Mimi?
I want to say that's the first step. But then how do we walk into the world? And we also know that there are 70 days from Yom Kippur until Hanukkah. 70 days, like a lifetime. 70 days that we move from a Sukkah, which is our Dirat Arai, to Ish Ubeito, our home. 70 days to make the transition. The pasuk that I want us to look at, and the Mea Shiloach looks at it, and if you look at your source sheet, you'll see that I actually, and I don't do this often, I actually don't remember the last time I did this, to bring the father, the son, and the grandson together. I seldomly actually do this in terms of looking at a Mea Shiloach and the Beit Yaakov, his son, and the Sod Yesharim, his grandson. But this is a core question, and they base it on a pasuk, which seems to be such a random pasuk and an insignificant pasuk. And when thinking about Sukkot, this is not the pasuk that we normally go to. Vayiven lo bait u'lemikneu asa Sukkot, al ken kara shem hamakom Sukkot. So this pasuk appears right after Yaakov and Esav part ways. We're in Parashat Vayishlach. And Esav goes on his way, and Yaakov goes on his way. And we're told that he builds a home for himself. He builds a sukkah for his cattle, his mikneh. And he names the location based on the dwelling that he made for his cattle, which makes no sense whatsoever. And that is the core question that the Mashiach, the Ishbitzer Rebbe, starts out with. להבין למה קרא שם המקום על שם המקנה שהוא טפל ולא על שמו שהוא העיקר. After this amazing encounter with Esav, it's hard to imagine why Yaakov would name the location of his next stop based on the cattle, what is considered to be tafel, secondary. And Michal, there's a request again for the source sheets to be posted. Thank you.
Yeah, it's in the chat. I'm going to post it again.
And he says the following. I'm going to read only a few lines. You see some of it's highlighted in bold and underlined, and some of it, so we'll look at a few of the sentences in each one. להבין למה קרא שם המקום השם המקנה שהוא תפל ולא על שמו שהוא העיקר. Should be Bet Yaakov. That's what the maybe location should be called. Why Sukkot? אכן בית עניינו הוא הגנה לאדם עד שאינו מרגיש מה מבחוץ. A home is our protection to the point that we don't actually know what's happening outside. We're protected and we're somewhat secluded. I want to say again, I want to hold on to Sukkot Chanukah because Chanukah is Ishu Beito, but the candles are lit actually at the entrance, at the opening. There's a way in which Dafka, the candles there are asking us, on one hand, we're defined by our home. On the other hand, there has to be access to the outside world. And that is going to be here the question, because I could also say that on Yom Kippur, we're really, in some way, we're cut off from the world. We're 25 hours very much deeply into our prayer, deeply into our kavanot, deeply into our fasting, deeply into our yearnings for the year to come. And so there's a way in which what's happening outside in the world, not so clear. And especially I want to say those who spent Yom Kippur in their home and were at prayers, at tefillot, only through Zoom, also, even more so, closed in, cloistered. שבית רומז על קדושת האבות שמגן שלא מדעת. So here's our metaphor. Our home, our bait, like the Mishnah says, know where we come from, where we come from and where we're going. He says that's our sense of security. Our home, our tribe, our family, our community. We're all the children of Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah. And that doesn't change. We don't need to do anything. We're born into that. Right? Or those of us who later in life make that choice to become part of the Jewish people. And once you become part of the Jewish people, then there's nothing to do. That is a commitment, a devotion. I want to say a commitment of God to us. That doesn't change, regardless of our actions. V'Yaakov, I'm skipping down a bunch of lines. ויעקב אבינו לא בטח על זכות אבות, רק זה היה לו שלא מדעת. Yaakov, he encounters Esav, and then he goes on his way, and he says, but who am I? And what can I rely on? And who can I rely on? That's the question when we go out into the Yom Kippur, with community, with our teachings, with our rabbis, with our congregants, with our students. Now what? Now where? And now with who? So Yaakov has this question within himself. What can he rely on? And therefore, Lemikneu asa Sukkot, the word mikneh is connected to the word kinyan, what he acquired. I want to say it's not our genetics, but it's what we've done with our lives, what we've claimed for ourselves, the identity of what we've claimed with our actions. למקנהו עשה סוכות, היינו להשתדלותיו וקנייניו, שזה נקרא בכל מאודיך. כי זה היה עיקר עבודתו לעשות הגנה מדעת, וזה היה העיקר אצלו. ויעקב, it wasn't about the family he was born into. It wasn't about that promise that God promises him because of his heritage. Yaakov wants to know what belongs to him by virtue of his own actions, his own fortitude, his own conviction. And therefore he says, who I am. You know, the Midrash says, the Midrash in Bereshit Rabbah says that we have multiple names, and one is the name that our parents give us when we come into the world. Another is the name that others call us. And the third is the name that we acquire for ourselves through our actions. So here the Sukkah begins to be this metaphor of my actions. And temporary actions that surround us for 7 days, true. But nonetheless, that they're actions that take the infinite and actually give it a form and shape. You know, my neighbor wasn't too happy with me because I put up a sukkah. Boaz, Shachak, God bless him, came to my home and he put up my sukkah in a parking spot. Now, I contacted the neighbor whose parking spot I was using, who was like more than happy and gracious about using their parking spot to put up the sukkah. And this other neighbor, she pulls in and she says, 30 years, and there's never been a sukkah here ever. And I smiled and I said, well, welcome. You're welcome to enjoy the sukkah now. And I didn't want to tell her, you know, when I signed the lease 2.5 years ago, I already saw my sukkah exactly where it is. How could you not see my sukkah being there for the last 2.5 years? Oh, because all you could see was your neighbor's parking spot. But when I looked at my neighbor's parking spot, I saw the sukkah. So the sukkah is a metaphor for our actions. The sukkah is a metaphor for walking in God's footsteps by virtue of being able to turn something from nothing, me'ayin, to yesh. And I want to say that it's the sitra achra, it's the Yetzer Hara that tells us if it's not going to last, then it's not worth anything. You know, without being too personal, but you always know that I am personal. About 30 years ago, I was given a gift to go to some health boot camp for a month to shed some weight. And I remember my chavrut at the time, he said to me, well, what's the point? You're going to go for a month and then you're going to come back and you'll be the same. And I said to him, you know, I'd like to believe that after 30 days, I'd like to believe that I'll learn enough to make a difference in my life. And if not, at least I know that I experienced other. At least I know that for 30 days, I experienced other. And the Sukkah gives us an opportunity to experience other. And to start with that, to start with knowing that I can't maybe make major promises. And I want to say, the long list of the Ashamnu Bagadnu, thank you very much, and the long list of the Achet, I pray that you also took time to do the opposite. Ahavti, Biliti, for each one in the positive. What did we do positive this past year? Not only what we transgressed. So that's the Me'ashiloch. He formulates the question of why the temporary, why naming after the temporary. Yaakov making a statement that actually the temporary is ours, is what we claim, and therefore it's not secondary, it's the essence. The Bet Yaakov, his son, will continue in that way and say, and therefore it's temporary, it doesn't have sustainability, and why would we create this kind of structure? And then he says, בכל שנה ושנה, יום הכיפורים, שעלה הגורל השם, שזה רומז, שהשם חפץ בישראל, באהבתו אותם. God loves us. That's the secret. The secret actually is that God loves us no matter what we do. Right? As parents, as teachers, we love our students, we love our children. And there's something intrinsic to that relationship that is irrelevant. Actions are irrelevant. Deeds are they're important. I'm not saying not. But there's something that we know inside of ourselves that no matter what, there's a part of my love for my soul children that will never be blemished, no matter what happens or doesn't happen. And he says the nations, they're jealous. And that can evoke judgment. Why does God love them so much, regardless of their actions? So we're told, mitzvah kala, something simple. It doesn't have to last forever. You know, a 7-day crash diet. You don't have to change for life. Something. Make a mark in the world. Do something in the world. Try it. That's what the Sukkah is. Temporary? Sure. Forever? No. But I want you to know, I don't know about you, but when I walk into my Sukkah, I can't believe that it wasn't there an hour ago. I can't believe that I didn't have this amazing dwelling an hour ago. And it doesn't matter that in 7 days it's going to go back to being a parking spot. Right now, so surrounded by God's love, so taken in by this possibility of creating something that literally was non-existent. There was like a pile of beams and a piece of material folded up and some dead branches. And now I'm majorly in love with my Sukkah. I didn't want to leave it this evening to go home, to come into the house to learn. I'm like, I can't wait. I can't wait to be in the moment. What we have is the moment. And I want you to know the people that we're so close with, so intimate with, the truth of the matter is that we know what that feels like. We don't have to make a conversation with them. We don't have to make plans for our future. Sitting with them for a moment fills our heart. And that is the essence of who we are, is being able to take those moments, And the Sod Yesharim, the Meshilach's grandson, the Beit Yaakov's son, so he, God bless him, in his Sod Yesharim, he has a whole book that is dedicated to Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot, a whole book of teaching. God created a world of chesed. And when God, היינו, כי החסד הראשון שהיה בהתחלת הבריאה, לא היה בו שום התערבות דלתתא מחסדו, יתברך שחפץ להיטיב לבריות. When God created the world, it came from a place of God's ultimate love and kindness. It wasn't dependent on our actions. We didn't exist. We didn't exist yet. So all of creation comes from a place of benevolence. And then what do we do in order to go back to that moment? Can we come back to that moment? And the Sod Yesharim says the time of Sukkot is the time of the Asif. It's the time of the harvesting. We bring our harvest back into our home. And for a moment, we have a sense that it's actually our actions. It's our work. It's what we've succeeded in doing in our lifetime. So therefore, we have the Sukkah. You think you're bringing it into your home? Really? You're bringing it into your Sukkah. You think that it's really all about your abilities and it's your toil? Actually, there's a partnership happening here. Yes, you have that ability. But in our capacity as human beings, God is eternal. God's work is eternal. God's creation is eternal. And ours, how do we negotiate and how do we live with the temporary? But how can we not only live with the temporary, this non-permanence, how do we value the non-permanence? What is it about us that thinks that if something is not permanent, that it has no value? or it's compromised in its value. What happened to the Torah of the moment? Can we embrace that? Right, for me, it's always Pesach, right? 18 minutes, matzah. 18 minutes and 1 second, chametz. So there we know what the value and the power of 1 second is. We have it here as well. The ability to have a moment where we experience God's closeness and God's intimacy. Is that enough? When I was a child, I thought that when we davened, we had to have kavanah from the first word when we open the siddur or open the machzor until the last word. And then the Hasidic Rebbes, Rabbi Avraham Kolitz and Rabbi Nachman David Tepes, they taught me, maybe actually out of all the tefillah, it's one sentence. Maybe actually of the whole tefillah, it's one word. I like to think of the Sukkah as well as that metaphor for that one word. Not the whole book. It's not the whole nusach. One word that I can walk with in the world from Yom Kippur. And one word today. And what's the word tomorrow going to be? I want to end with a teaching from the Mashiach, which is one of my favorite teachings, on the pasuk Ki lo nachash b'Yaakov v'lo kesem b'Yisrael. Ke'et yamer liYaakov v'Yisrael ma pa'al el. Because if you remember, the Beit Yaakov, he said, we make the Sukkah because what are the nations going to say when they see this unconditional love? That there's a wisdom that Bilam has to understand how we walk in the world in our relationship with God. Nachash, nechishut, snake, nechishut is determination. Yaakov is used as an understanding of consciousness, of contracted consciousness. Yaakov, Yud Ekev, like our heel. We want to talk about our contracted consciousness in God's presence, we use the name Yaakov. We want to talk about expansive consciousness, Israel, Li Rosh. And you know Yaakov Avinu is the one that his name continually changes. In the same pasuk, look at Bereshit Memtet. You'll see in the same pasuk, Yaakov and Israel. It's not that he graduated from contracted consciousness into expanded consciousness and has an understanding and a vision that he didn't have before. We go in and out of experience, in and out of perception, in and out of moments of being in God's presence and feeling so far from God. In and out of having a moment of knowing what God wants of us, having an inside, I want to say conviction, an epiphany, a moment of prophecy. We have a sense of clarity, what God wants of us in this moment. And then sometimes we walk around for days, for weeks.
Michal, would you please stop playing with your hair? It's very discerning.
Lo nachash, I'm sorry. I didn't hear what you said, but something I'm doing is uncomfortable for you. Lo nachash b'Yaakov. When we are in a state of Yaakov, of contracted consciousness, we don't hold on to it b'nechishut. We don't hold on to it and insist and persist. On the other hand, lo kesem b'Yisrael, when we have clarity as to what it is we're meant to be doing, we don't wait for it to happen by itself. We actually go out into the world and make it happen. And then, ka'et ya'amer liYaakov v'Yisrael ma pa'al el, the gift that we have is that we know to identify when it is that we need to hold back and wait and let things happen by themselves, and when it is that we know to create a reality. And again, the Sukkah, on the one hand, gives us both of these abilities. It tells us when we come out of Yom Kippur, there's something to do. There's something that we need to act upon. We need to create a holy space from what seems to be no space. And on the other hand, Yes. How long do I hold on to it? 7 days. How long am I meant to hold on to it? What's going to happen in those 70 days from Sukkot to Hanukkah? What are the things that I know that they're going to be completely temporary, not permanent, only a Sukkah? And what of all those promises, commitments, devotion, yearnings, longings, and moments of Yom Kippur are we going to actually hold on to as a bite and bring them first into our Sukkah, experience them, and then to say, this I'm holding on to, this I'm taking with me from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur to Sukkot into Hanukkah. And these are here for the moment. And they're going to hold me for 7 days. And I'm going to say thank you. I'm going to say, Hodu l'Adonai ki tov, ki l'olam chasto. And then I'm going to continue on. And bless us to be able to make those distinctions in our life, in our heart, in our soul, in our being, in our relationship with God, between our permanent and our impermanent. And that we can share those impermanent moments as well as our permanent moments.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Mimi. I think it was very inspiring and just to experience this Sukkah, and I'm sure that all of us are going to take in that experience. I want to move on forward to Gila.
Hi, good evening or good afternoon, wherever you are.
Hi, Gila. Thank you for joining us. Gila Bachman. She is a doctor for the Schechter Institute and the Schechter Rabbinical Seminary. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you'll enjoy her lecture about the Sukkah with Rabbi Eliezer, Halacha and Agada.
Thank you very much, Michal, and again, hello to everybody. I'm going to share my screen, unlike the previous speakers. I hope it works okay for everybody. So the main, my learning will focus on a most unusual rabbi and his special connection to the festival of Sukkot. And of course, this is Rabbi Eliezer, in his full name, Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkenus. And he was one of the most important Tanaim, sages of the Mishnah. He was a student of Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. Some of you might know the stories about how he took part in saving him and getting him out of Yerushalayim during the destruction. And he was the teacher of Rabbi Akiva. So this puts him in a very central place. And according to the Talmudic stories, he started studying at a late age, 28 probably, and left a life of wealth to learn Torah at Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai's Bet Midrash in Jerusalem. He established a yeshiva in Lod. So in the next 20-something minutes or so, we will look at his sayings and read some stories about him from the Mishnah, the Tosefta, the Midrash, and the Talmud. And we will examine some of the machlokot, the disputes regarding the Sukkah, in which he presents a single opinion against the opinion of the rabbis, of the sages. And we will try to understand what approach does he represent and how do the stories about him relate to his halachic approach. This is a unique combination of Agadah and Halacha, and they seem to affect each other. Most of them will be found in the Talmud. I'm going to bring them from several sources. I see that I am asked to enlarge the slideshow. It's not big enough. I'll do my best, but I also I'm trying to do it also convenient for me. So maybe you can enlarge your own screen or something like that.
If you click on the presentation button, then it will fill the screen.
Yes, but then I hope I can move. I usually have problems with that. Oh,
No, you're fine. You're fine. People
Okay.
can do it from home.
okay. I'll try this way, and if it doesn't work, I go back to the other way. Okay, so the first source that we see here, I hope you all see it. This is from the Mishnah. Mishnah Masechet Sukkah, Perek Bet Mishnah Vav. And here is the first machloket, the first dispute. So Rabbi Eliezer says, a person is obligated to eat 14 meals in the Sukkah, one during the day and one at night. Of course, this refers to all 7 days. That's how we got to 14 meals. And the rabbis say there is no quota for this matter, except for the meal on the evening of the first festival. So first of all, we have to have in mind that in the time of the sages, in the time of the Mishnah, the custom was to have 2 meals a day, not 3 meals as we might think of it. So Rabbi Eliezer here represents a maximalist or demanding approach, which requires the person to have 2 meals a day every day, even on Chol HaMoed. Okay. On the other hand, the rabbis require only 1 as a mandatory meal, probably like Leila Seder, the meal of Pesach. The Gemara eventually learns this from Pesach, but nevertheless, all the other meals depend on the will of the person. It isn't mentioned explicitly, but I would assume that also the 3 meals of Shabbat should be eaten in the Sukkah, because they are also mandatory. But we see a dispute, a machloket here, about how many meals a person should eat in the Sukkah. Now, this is discussed in the Talmud. The Talmud, Bavli, Masechet Sukkah, Daf Kaf Zayin Amud Aleph, tries to understand what is the reason for each side in this machloket. So the Gemara, the Talmud asks, what is the rationale, or what is the reason for the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer? And they say he learns it from the verse, Besukkot teshvu shivat yamin. You can see the verse at the bottom of the PowerPoint, right? So the word teshvu, okay, in Sukkot you shall reside as you dwell in your permanent home. Okay, the word permanent and the word temporary, which also appeared in the previous shiur with Rab Mimi, will appear again here. This comes from the idea of a permanent dwelling. So therefore, just as in one's dwelling, one eats 1 meal during the day and 1 meal at night, so too in the Sukkah, 1 meal should be eaten during the day and 1 at night. That's the explanation of Rabbi Eliezer. What about the rabbis? Well, they also use the word kedira as a permanent dwelling. A sukkah is like a permanent dwelling, just as in one's dwelling, if one desires to eat, and if one does not desire to do so, he does not eat. So too in the sukkah, if one desires to eat, he eats, and if not, he does not eat. So as we can see, basically, both Rabbi Eliezer and Chachamim rely on the same verse, the verse Besukkot teshvu shivat yamim. Only each side perceives the concept of taduru, teshvu ke'ein taduru, that you should reside, in a different way. For Rabbi Eliezer, the dwelling in the sukkah is total, both day and night, and therefore he requires 14 meals. For the sages, residing in the sukkah is an expression of freedom and independence. A person is to behave naturally and feel at home, as we say, in the sukkah. So if you want, you can eat. If you don't want, you don't have to. That's the first machloket, the first dispute, and its reasoning or its rationale. Now we come to another machloket, and this one comes from a Braita, a Tanaitic source, but it doesn't appear in the Mishnah. The Talmud brings it, and it says, Tanya, which means this is a Braita. Rabbi Eliezer says, one may not depart from one sukkah to another sukkah, and one may not build a sukkah during Chol HaMoed. Even if you did not have a chance to build the sukkah beforehand, you should not build a sukkah during Chol HaMoed. And the rabbi said, one may depart from one sukkah to another sukkah, and one may build a sukkah on Chol HaMoed. Again, the Talmud asks, what's the reason? What's the logic behind these things? I think I skipped it. Oh, here it is. Where is the rationale of Rabbi Eliezer? Because the verse says, you shall prepare for yourself you should prepare for yourself the festival of Sukkot for 7 days. Establish a sukkah that is suitable for 7 days. You cannot build it during Chol HaMoed. It should be built for 7 days. It should last 7 days. And what do the rabbis say? How do the rabbis interpret this verse? This is what the Torah says, establish sukkah during the festival. So again, both sides refer to the same pasuk, only they understand it a bit different, in a bit different way. I'm just going to change no, that's not what I wanted to do. I'm sorry, I'm going to stop here for a minute. I hope you're still with me. Just a second. This is a chance for everybody to wake up if you fell asleep. So we see another machloket, another dispute, saying that there are two different opinions of how to look at the building of the sukkah. Notice that the reasoning, the rationale that the Talmud gives does not refer to the first part. The Talmud does not discuss the reason for why not to leave from one sukkah to the other. But I think we're going to get the explanation for this using the next source, which is a midrash, the midrash on the book of Deuteronomy, Sifrei Dvarim. And here in the midrash, regarding the verse, Chag HaSukkot ta'aseh lecha shiv'at yamim, we actually saw this verse in the Braita before. So Rabbi Eliezer says, here's another machloket between the sides. Rabbi Eliezer says, just as one does not fulfill his obligation on the first day of the festival with his neighbor's lulav, you know that each and every one has to have or use a lulav to themselves, say the blessing on the lulav. So he does not fulfill it with his neighbor's sukkah. It being written, shall you make for yourself. Chag HaSukkot ta'aseh lecha. You are supposed to make the sukkah for yourself. And the rabbis say, he does not fulfill his obligation with his neighbor's lulav. That is true. It being written, and you shall take you on the first day the fruit of goodly trees, branches of palm trees. I hope you know this pasuk. Ulekachtem lachem bayom harishon. So ulekachtem lachem. You should take for each individual. But he does fulfill his obligation with his neighbor's sukkah. It being written, every native in Israel shall dwell in Sukkot. All of Israel may dwell in one sukkah. This is a very main idea in the idea that all our people are, well, they deserve or they may dwell in one sukkah. Technically, quite a problem. But the reason that the rabbis learned this idea comes from the word Sukkot. You can see that the word Sukkot is one sukkah, not any. So again, we see the different way of Rabbi Eliezer and the rabbis to read the during the Chag. luckily, the halacha is not according to Rabbi Eliezer, and I'm going to discuss this in the continuation of my view. So here we see another machloket, another dispute regarding, and I think you can start to see that there's something that consistent about the way Rabbi Eliezer looks at the Sukkah and what he demands of a person in order to fulfill the mitzvah of Sukkot. Okay, so another Tanaitic source comes from the Tosefta, which is constructed very much, arranged very much like the Mishnah, and also in the Tosefta in Masechet Sukkah in the 2nd chapter, we find this very interesting source. It's not, this time it is not a machloket, it is not a dispute between Rabbi Eliezer and Chachamim, but we find Rabbi Eliezer's opinion in it. So the Tosefta says, those out on a mission of mitzvah, shluchei mitzvah, are exempt from Sukkah, from the mitzvah of Sukkah. They do not have to build a Sukkah if they're on the road. However, it is praise for a man to leave his house during the festival. They're allowed to not having a Sukkah, but it's not a good thing to have, only if it's necessary. And then the Tosefta tells us a story. There's a story of Rabbi Eli, who went to visit Rabbi Eliezer in Lud. I remind you that Rabbi Eliezer established the yeshiva in Lud. So this story tells us about probably his principal, his pupil that came to visit him, probably during the festival. And Rabbi Eliezer said to him, "What does this mean, Eli? Are you not one of those who rest on the festival?" It's a very not nice welcoming of your disciple, right? What are you doing here? Are you not, you're supposed to be resting now in your home and not come to visit me? Is it not said, it is no praise for a man to leave his house during the festival, since it is said, you shall rejoice. Okay, here we connect to the first shiur, the first lecture. You shall rejoice in your festival with your son and daughter. You probably know this pasuk, right? V'samachta b'chagecha ata uvincha uvitecha, etc. So I see a question here: is that Tosefta talking about building a sukkah or dwelling in a sukkah? True. This source does not mention a sukkah. It only mentions a home. You should not leave your home. But we see, first of all, it comes from a Sechet Sukkah, so we might assume that it talks about the sukkah, and also the pasuk v'tzamachta b'chagecha, we know talks about Sukkot. So it doesn't mention anything about building or not building a sukkah. It says that shluchei mitzvah pturim min sukkah. They don't have to. They're exempt from the mitzvah of sukkah. They don't have to eat or sleep in the sukkah. Obviously, they're on the way. They can't do it. But what is more interesting is the story here, because the story emphasizes that Rabbi Eliezer is against leaving your home, or as we saw in the previous source, leaving your sukkah, even if it's for some kind of mitzvah. Rabbi Eli might even be a shliach mitzvah, visiting his rabbi. That we know that there's a I've been disconnected for a minute. I'm sorry for this. So the next source is actually a story, a very famous story in the Talmud. The Talmud brings this story sort of right after what we read, the discussion about leaving a sukkah during the festival. And this story tells us about Rabbi Eliezer. Once Rabbi Eliezer stayed in the sukkah of Rabbi Yochanan, son of Rabbi Eli, in Caesarea. This is probably the same Eli that we met before, his disciple. Now this is his son Rabbi Yochanan, in which sukkah Rabbi Eliezer. The sun was approaching, probably the day is becoming more and more hot. Rabbi Yochanan said, may I spread a sheet over it, to cover it, to make some shade? Rabbi Eliezer said, there is no tribe of Israel from which a judge did not emerge. It's very hard to see the connection between his answer and the question. It has nothing to do, no relation whatsoever. Strange, but the story continues. In the meantime, the sun reached the midpoint of the sukkah. The sun keeps on going. Time passes. Rabbi Yochanan said, may I spread a sheet over it? It becomes more and more important to do it. Rabbi Eliezer said to him, there is no tribe of Israel from which prophets did not emerge. And the tribes of Judah and Benjamin established kings according to prophets. Again, he answers. His answer has no connection to the question. Rabbi Yochanan, at that point, the sun reached the feet of Rabbi Eliezer. It's getting really close. In a minute, he's going to be sitting in the hot sun. Anybody who sits in the sukkah in Israel during September knows it can turn really hot and unpleasant. And that's what Rabbi Yochanan obviously is afraid of. So Rabbi Yochanan the sheet and spread it over the sukkah. Rabbi Eliezer slung his cloak behind him and left the sukkah. Not because he was diverting his attention with his words. I think this means that Rabbi Eliezer was saying things that have no connection, but because he never said a matter that he did not hear from his teacher. And this is the point of this story. It's a very, very puzzling story, and the behavior of Rabbi Eliezer in the story is very puzzling. Why does he not respond? What is the meaning of his sermon, of his Dvar Torah? What is he saying here about the tribes? Why does it have to do with the situation? And I would love to hear ideas. If anybody have, you can write in the chat. What do you think is the connection between speaking about the judges and the prophets and the kings? What does it have to do with sitting in the sukkah? But this way or the other, without getting into this very complicated question, it is clear that Rabbi Eliezer purposely avoids answering Rabbi Yochanan and expects him to understand the idea by himself. He forbids to spread the sheet. Otherwise, he would act differently. So why does he not say it explicitly? According to the Talmud, and this is probably an addition, it's not an imminent part of the story, the last sentence, is that he never heard this answer from his rabbi, and therefore he could not say it explicitly. And this is the very main part of his character. And we're going to see it in other sources. I think the next source even says it stronger. First of all, we have to say that Talmud asks, and we probably all asked ourselves, didn't he just say that you're not allowed to sit in some other person's sukkah during the Sukkot? You should not leave your own sukkah. That's what Talmud asks. How did Rabbi Eliezer do so? Didn't he himself say one may not depart from one sukkah to another sukkah? So what is he doing in Caesarea, right? So they say the incident was in a different festival. This was not a sukkah for a mitzvah. This was just a sukkah for sitting in the shade. Okay, so this is a different festival, but still, remember the story with Eli? He said, "Meshabeach ani et ha'atzlanim she'en yotzim mibatehem regel." I praise the lazy. This is the word the Gemara uses, lazy, who do not leave their houses on the festival. And then they say, okay, it wasn't a festival, it was Shabbat. So the whole question here is not a question of Sukkah, it's a question of Shabbat. This is one way of looking at it, but I think a different way of looking at it is as the character of Rabbi Eliezer. And here's another story, and this one has to be in Sukkot. Maaseh Rabbi Eliezer, once Rabbi Eliezer stayed in the Upper Galilee, and the people there asked him 30 halachot in the halachot of Sukkah. So this is really a question of Sukkah. In response to 12, he said, I heard an answer. In response to the other 18, he said, I did not hear an answer. He refuses to answer because he never heard an answer for these questions. So they asked him, the people, are all the matters that you know only from what you heard? He said to them, now you forced me to say a matter that I did not hear from my teachers. And this is the thing he said. In all my days, no person ever preceded me into the study hall, Bet HaMidrash, and I never slept in the study hall, neither substantial sleep or a brief nap. Notice that in Hebrew it says, Lo sheinat keva, velo sheinat arai. Here are the words permanent and temporary, which repeat many times in these discussions in the Talmud. And I never left anyone in the study hall and exited. I never engaged in idle conversation, and I never said anything that I did not hear from my teacher. And this is the main idea of Rabbi Eliezer, in my opinion. I'm just looking at the question here. Am I correct that you can also do not leave your home to eat afikoman? Right. A very similar halacha about Pesach, about afikoman. You must not leave one chavura, one group of people, in order to eat the Pesach, the Korban itself, with another chavura. So here's another similarity between Pesach and Sukkot. But going back to Rabbi Eliezer character, and my time is almost running up, so I really have to get things quicker. There's a very famous saying in Masechet Avot, in the Mishnah, about Rabbi Eliezer, said from his teacher, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had 5 disciples, and they were these: Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus, Rabbi Yoshua ben Hanania, Rabbi Yosei the priest, Rabbi Shimon ben Netanel, and Rabbi Elazar ben Arach. And he used to list their virtues. Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus is a plastered cistern, a plastered pit, which loses not a drop. Bo sud she'eino me'abed tipa. Okay, so the basic characteristic or the basic notion of Rabbi Eliezer is his preserving. He preserves the Torah he receives without, fully, in a maximum, without losing a drop, but also without changing or adding anything. Unlike Rabbi Elazar, for example, Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, Ma'ayan HaMitgaber, a rising spring. This is a different form of water, not preserving, but emerge, right? Flowing, original. Rabbi Elazar ben Arach is an independent learner, as opposed to Rabbi Eliezer, who only says what he heard from his teachers. So now I think we can understand why halacha was not set according to Rabbi Eliezer, because Rabbi Eliezer represents what is stable, what is very strict, and this approach does not suit the temporary and unstable nature of Sukkot, the holiday which sends us, as Rab Mimi said, sends us outdoors and asks us to remember the years of wandering in the wilderness. Ki b'Sukkot hoshavti et bnei Israel. So this is why the halacha was not determined according to Rabbi Eliezer. The holiday of Sukkot really asks us, requires us to be flexible and ask us to look at the temporary as our home for the Chag. So I would like to wish you all happy and temporary and flexible Chag Sukkot. And I do wish that you all feel at home wherever you are. And Chag Sameach.
Toda rabba. Thank you very, very much, Dr. Gila Bachman. Learned a lot about so many midrashim that about Sukkot that even didn't realize that they were happening. And now I'm happy to present Dr. Shula Lederman, who is a lecturer in Jewish art for the Schechter Institute. Hi, Shula. Can you see us, Shura?
אוקיי, הנה אני.
מצוין.
אוקיי. טוב, אני כבר רק רגע, אשים את ה... רגע, אני אתחיל מההתחלה. אוקיי, שלום לכולם. Hi to everybody. This is the last lecture of today, and I'm going to speak about the Sukkah as the most meaningful architectural, artistic Jewish architectural structure. And I'm bringing you here a picture that I'll come to it at the end. And what I'd like to show you at this lecture is how incredible the Sukkah is. We are starting with art that we all know, more contemporary. This is a 19th century Moritz Oppenheim, who lived in the ghetto, but he actually was born when the ghetto was abandoned, but already, people didn't have to stay in the ghetto, but his whole being was to memorize and to kind of bring people back to the atmosphere of the ghetto. And here he's showing us the people sitting in the sukkah, where you see the two Gentile boys looking at this family sitting in this temporary place outside. It's all decorated beautifully, and the maid is bringing them the food. And it's very interesting to see that this is really a structure that we know about and that Jewish families have been sitting in ever since the desert, and it's kept ever since the exodus from Egypt, and we can see it in the art of 19th century. We'll see it back in the Middle Ages, and we'll see it in 21st century also. Now, this is really to keep this tradition, this collective memory of the Israelite people in the desert when God brought them out of Egypt, and they felt like to being under God's protection and other God's providence. And here you can see we have here a picture that says the Sukkot tishvu shivat yamim. In Sukkot they are to sit temporary shelters for 7 days, and we have this biblical command that is being kept up, and you can see all this Sukkot in Jerusalem. You can see everywhere the Sukkot build, and also in other places, of course. And it's interesting to see that in the day, the fall season, when you finish the harvest, you finish gathering everything, that's when you have to leave your home and go to your permanent home and go to the temporary home that's been discussed here over and over. And for 7 days. Now here in the Israel Museum, we have a sukkah that was bought from Germany, for southern Germany, a sukkah from the 19th century. Again, you can see how people really invested a lot of energy in preparing beautiful sukkot, and with the pictures and the decoration. And this is on permanent display. It was bought from Germany, and we have it in the museum. And of course, what's important here is to feel that there is a structure, but basically we don't have exact measurement for the sukkah. We have some basic rules that are and specification that we know that it has to have at least 2.5 walls, and it has to have a schach that allows you to look at the sky and see the stars. And here is an example of such a structure that was prepared and being built every year. We have also Marc Chagall here in 1916 showing us the traditionally built sukkah, where the men sit in the sukkah. We have a man with the lulav and the four species, and we have them sitting, and the woman is bringing them the food. And obviously, it was important for each of these artists to show us how special the sukkah is when you come out of the home outside, and I'm sure that in Russia it was less present than in Israel when you have to be in the Sukkah in the winter, in a harsher climate. I know I lived in Denver, Colorado, and we had to sometimes snow in the Sukkah. So, but in Israel, of course, we have a very nice weather, and sometimes it's very warm, but it's really giving us the feeling of being outside, of being part of nature. And if we look at the Sukkot that we have some kind of knowledge of, is we start seeing them, pictures of them, visualization of them, we start seeing them in the Middle Ages. When I wanted to look at early Sukkot, I opened Machzorim, ancient Machzorim. We have here Machzor from the 14th century, and what it was in the Machzorim, the collection of the different tefillot to holidays. Machzor is a Ashkenazic invention where you don't have to carry the whole siddur, but you arrange the piyutim, the poems, and the liturgy according to the holidays. And here we have a beautiful piyut, ha'ametz, and it's a piyut praising God, and the word, the initial word is decorated, because in Latin manuscript, of course, we decorate the initial letter in all the Latin languages, but in Hebrew, you cannot separate the initial letter, so you have the initial word that you decorate, and here you see each one of the letters is in its own block, and the frame is really the Sukkah. What do we have here? We have here a manuscript that describes for us 3 branches, palm branches, which symbolize, or like Rabbi Mimi said, the metaphor of a sukkah is what you see here. These 3 branches that constitute a sukkah. So when we look carefully at medieval manuscript, we can learn how they understood the sukkah as a symbol. And I brought few examples, like this one is a machzor from southern Germany from the 13th century. And we have the words of the piyut, of the poem, mentioned in a very beautiful way to teach us that every word has a meaning, but the meaning is from the Torah. The piyut usually uses phrases from the Bible and from Midrash and from different sources. This one is a piyut of Rabbi Elazar HaKalir, who was, very famous poem, Paitan, and it takes the words into the piyut that are mentioned in the Torah. I will ascribe might unto all feared, and as I watch at his door, may I find redemption. So this is on the 15 days. Every word here means that it connects to a midrash, because we are watching the redemption, because we are outside and we are under God's wings, Ananeha Kavod, under the clouds of God. And so this is how the Paitan plays with the words of the Torah and the explanation, and creates this beautiful poem, this beautiful liturgy. And then the illustrator comes and he gives it the symbol of the sukkah, that what's important is to have this frame that is botanical. It's something that is growing, and it also shows us the connection to nature and to God. In this, you could see different kinds of references, like with majesty will I clothe him that dwelleth in the heights, loading him with my gift of perfect and unblemished branches. Unblemished branches refer to different kinds of things, like it's the love or it's the palm branches, who crown him with adoration and glory with branches of palm tree. Meaning we have here a usage of the Hebrew language and the poetry that brings together all the beautiful sources that we have. Now, all these verses have a lot of meaning in the poetry. I mean, we went to Yom Kippur now and Rosh Hashanah, and we read a lot of piyutim. And here we have more piyutim that refer to the beauty of the holiday being a nature holiday. And here you can see another manuscript, and this is from the 14th century. It's called Piskei Ishayahu. It's a book of halachot, a book of Jewish law written in the 13th century by an Italian rabbi whose name was Rabbi Ishaya Detrani, the younger. And you see the decoration shows us a sukkah that is all branches, and it has a bench inside because you have to be able to go inside and eat and dwell here. But the main frame is the branches that you see here. We have another example of a beautiful manuscript from Emilia. Emilia, it's a 15th century manuscript of an Italian mahzor from Emilia. And here the illustrator wanted to point out to us how important the schach, the covering is, and the building of the poles. Now, we know that a sukkah has to have at least 2.5 walls, but here they show us something that is in the halacha, that if a pole has a way to be opened up, but it could constitute like a wall. And here you can see the branches, the flora that's wrapping around and creating this nature feeling, and yet also is okay halacha wise. And then we see the family. After they build the sukkah, we have them, create the sukkah, and then they sit in the sukkah. And this is very important to emphasize again the halacha that were mentioned by the previous lecturer, that you have to rejoice in the holiday. You have to have the family. Here we have the men of the house making a kiddush, and they have guests. And this is part of the nature of the holiday that's so emphasized in right here in the picture that you see. Important to show the thickness of the walls and the way they put the schachat, and then to show the family eating. And interestingly, what's so nice in art from the Middle Ages is that we really are opening up like a window to see what our forefathers look like. We see what they dress. This is Italy. They're wearing like Renaissance clothes. We see the lighting, which is the Judenstern, meaning the Jews used to have a candelabra that would be allow them to light the candles and would look like a star, and then it could also serve as a lighting fixture. So all of this is showing us the genre of life back in the Middle Ages, and the really importance that they gave to the sukkah and to the celebration in nice dishes and with guests. That is so important. Now, in all this example that I brought from the Middle Ages, we can say that that the sukkah, from its very inception in the desert throughout the Middle Ages and up to the present day, represents a unique sacred architecture that reflects a virtual reality set in time, acknowledging the changing of the season in space, a carefully defined temporary structure, and in thought, an allusion to collective national and religious memories of the tabernacle and the temple, through which one can acquire a palpable sense of being close to God and his creation. So that the feeling of ananei kavod, of the clouds of God, that the schach on top symbolizes, creates that kind of a feeling that we have for 7 days every year. Now, the interesting thing is, here we were in the Middle Ages, and now I'm taking you on a tremendous journey up to the 21st century. After we saw the Sukkot, the way they were described in the Middle Ages and the way they are in the artists of the 19th century and 20th century, we come to the year 2010. And the year 2010, there was an architectonic, there was a contest that was sponsored by Sukkah City, New York, and they sent out a way to invite architects to create a sukkah that would fit their ideas of the 21st century. Then the Sukkot that were chosen, 600 architects joined this exhibit. Most of them were not Jewish. They were so excited with the rules that were given of what a sukkah should be, that they created many different kinds of sukkot. And what you see here is Union Square, New York, in September 2010. And here are the display of the 12 sukkot that were chosen as winners of the exhibit. And I'll show you some of them because it's really fascinating. Here is, you have one where, like I said, 600 architect designers and artists from around the world submitted original designs for modern day Sukkot. Now, they were told what the rules of the Sukkah is, but they kind of interpreted it as a metaphor for ecology, for the importance of nature, for the importance of preserving one's community and a connection to the beauty of nature, and many other things that I show you. The composition described in the competition, they described the sukkah in very contemporary terms, expressing universal ideas of transience and permanence, like it's been spoken about before, as expressed in architecture. How do you create a structure that is both transient and permanent? So here you have a design, repetitious, that's the way they wrote it. Repetitions meets difference. Stability meets volatileness. And this is the artist that made this. Another one, the sukkah, is a means of ceremoniously practicing homelessness, while at the same time remaining deeply rooted. So here you have an example of an artist who created this, called it Shim Sukkah, and he says that here it's, on one hand, it's homelessness, it's outside, it's not a permanent home, very temporary, but it's still deeply rooted. It has to have material that is is something that is from nature, and it has the schach, the top, and it has to be able to see the stars and to be part of nature. Another example, it calls on us to acknowledge the changing of season, to reconnect with an agricultural past, and to take a moment to dwell on and dwell in impermanence. And here is the example that was chosen. This won the first prize. It was called Fractured Bubble. Two artists that made it. And they wanted to create this feeling that we have things growing, but they're not from the ground, but they are botanical things, but they allow space inside to celebrate the holiday. So this is knowing the season, being aware of nature around you, and being in touch with the agriculture. Another example is what you see here. Historically, the Sukkah's permanent recurrence is not as a monument, archetype, or typology, but as a set of precise parameters. I mean, there is different parameters that you have to obey. And here it meets the Talmud. They feel that was one of the ways to be able to see the stars and to see nature around you, and to be able to feel the permanence, but not a monumental structure. Another idea is the idea that you see here. The basic constraint seems simple. The structure must be temporary, have at least 2.5 walls, be big enough to contain a table, and have roof made of shade-providing organic material through which you could see the stars. So they took this thread-like that they created from the Sukkah to fulfill this kind of an instruction. This one is my favorite. This is an amazing one. This is called Sukkah of the Signs. What does it mean, Sukkah of the Signs? What do we see here? We see many signs here that have stuff written on it. The Sukkah itself is built of a thin wood, like a very thin wood. And these two artists went around all over San Francisco, Oakland, the Bay Area, and they went to homeless people and bought from them the cardboard signs that they either slept on or used to collect money. They bought it with money, and then they pasted them, they glued them onto their sukkah. And they call this the paradoxical effect of this constraint is to produce a building that is at once new and old, timely and timeless, mobile and stable, open and closed, homey and uncanny, comfortable and critical, to comply. Sorry, just a minute. To comply with the sukkah requirements, the makers of this sukkah use special thin wood that will look like cardboard, but will qualify as a natural growing material. And on it, like I said, they went around and bought all of these signs and glued them on to kind of give the feeling that by having a sukkah and creating this temporary feeling where we really, in a way, are homeless. We come out of our home and we have a very temporary homeless type house. We are to really connect with people who's not just 7 days are homeless, but their whole life is to deal with homelessness. And the interesting thing is that at the end of this exhibit, what they did was they sold all of those creations and they gave the money to homeless people. So this was their way of connecting and tying the ideas of sukkah to homeless people, but also to become aware of the needs that we have towards nature and the responsibility we have to feel part of nature, to be ecological, to be aware of the seasons, and to be aware of climate changes and all of that. So the Sukkah's distinctive characteristics are really evident in images found starting with the Machzorim, where it's really metaphors to the beautiful words of the Piyutim, and trying to visualize the ideas of the liturgy of the holiday and show how it connects with the ideas of the things we have to have for the holidays, the Sukkah, the 4 species, the lulav, etc. So that by seeing those machzorim that we looked at from the 13th, 14th, 15th centuries, all these illuminated manuscripts that included liturgy and halachic legal guidance for the construction of the Sukkah, and seeing the special piyutim. The piyutim is another way of creating artistic expressions of a beautiful holiday like the Sukkot, and bringing the simcha, the samachta b'chagecha, through the text of the poetry. And it's so interesting to see that all of this creation was so exciting to so many people who were not even Jewish, but felt that all of these principles around the Sukkah speak to them. The interesting thing is the man that that was the head of this contest, his name is Bennett. Now, I don't know if he's a relation to our prime minister, but it seemed like such a genius kind of a way to publicize the beauty of the holiday of Sukkot and the simcha that we have by celebrating it. So thank you very much.
Wow, Shula, this was so amazing to see. And a way to make me feel bad about my Sukkah. But really, really beautiful and incredible, inspiring Sukkot, and the meaning behind it was also outstanding. Thank you very, very much. So thank you everyone for joining us today for our Zooming into Sukkot of the Schechter Institute. I had a great time getting to know you better and listening to all the really interesting and inspiring lectures. And I really, really hope that very soon we will be meeting again. If you would like, all the lectures are recorded and are available on our YouTube channel. And we just want to wish you Chag Sameach, Moadim LeSimcha. We hope we have beautiful and interesting and joyous holidays. And thank you very much for joining us today. Leitraot.
יופי.
זה בסדר?